Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror and detail, the realm where the shadows whisper ancient secrets and nightmares come to life. I am your guide through the darkness, and on this channel, we delve into the spine-chilling world of Wendigo horror stories that will send shivers down your spine. First story. My encounter with a Wendigo. I'm a mortar infantryman for the Army. We're trained to deal with deadly situations and be prepared to fight to the death if needed. My experience happened approximately 4 years ago, but he hasn't left me alone since then. One day during January that year, my parents had me walk the family dog and my dog, so I decided to bring them to the golf course that was shut down for the season. Now across the golf course there's a small forest area that I usually walk them in because it's the closest I get to forests since I live in the city. Now I live about 20 minutes from Minneapolis in Minnesota. It's very industrialized here, and it's one place you wouldn't expect to run into something like this. Back to the story. I went in through the opening and went down the trail. That place always felt like it was really off for some reason. I don't know. Call it a sense that something is wrong with that place, and the fact that there's no sound in the woods. I ignored it and went on with their walk, and suddenly I felt like I was being watched. I couldn't tell anything with all the snow on the trees, and the fact that there's no snow that fell from them either. So like a dumbass I ignored it and went on. I went out the other side of the forest and headed up a hill that leads to a road that leads to the end of the golf course. I felt the feeling of being watched again and turned around on instinct and saw it. It was pale white figure standing in the tree. I'm a person who always believed in the supernatural and enjoyed studying it, and I knew what that thing was. It was a Wendigo, and I knew I needed to get out of there. For those who don't know, a Wendigo is a mythical creature that is believed in Native American folklore. It's believed that it's a carnivorous monster that never stops eating. Back to the story. I ran as fast as I could with the dogs across the street, and it started to chase me. I almost got hit by an oncoming van, and it stopped and looked at what I was running from, and immediately got back in his van and drove off faster than he did before. While he was distracted, I ran as fast as I could, and like a dumbass I ran back to my home. Once I got home, I acted as natural as I could and went to my room and tried my best to calm down. By dinner I had calmed down and ate dinner. Once it came to going to bed, it's when it started to get creepy. To explain the layout of where I am in the house, my room is right below the roof and has another small roof that is above the front porch, which is right outside my window. Back to the story. I shut my blinds and got ready for bed, but then I heard footsteps on my roof, followed by a small thump right outside my window. I saw the silhouette of it. That fucker was hunched over looking in my window as if he could see me. I was terrified by this and couldn't sleep at all. I couldn't even breathe. It stood there for what felt like eternity, which was only about 2 hours. After that time had passed, he gave up after letting out a scream. It was like a mix of the alien scream and a cat getting skinned alive, or the scream from a Wendigo from the video game Until Dawn. My parents wondered what was going on, and I made up some bullshit excuse. They believed me and headed back to bed. There was no need to get them into this, and it's not like they'll believe me anyway. My dumb ass didn't take a picture or video. That wasn't the end of it. This happened every day of every week for about 2 months, then turned to every other day to every week to every month. Nowadays I don't see it much, but I see him every now and then. I still go to that area even to this day, and even found a skinwalker there, but that's a story for another day. If you ever run into a Wendigo, run. Run as fast as you can, as far away as you can. I don't care if you have to run to a new city. Fuck, I don't care if you have to leave the state. Just run so far away that you lose that fucker. Or the same events that happened to me may happen to you. If you have any information about how to kill this fucker, leave it in the comments. I've already tried holy water, and it didn't work. Put that shit all over the roof outside my window, and the fucker was standing on it like it was nothing. Be careful. Sometimes while searching for monsters, they'll end up finding you. Second story. As a native, I think me and my mother may have had close calls with skinwalkers/Wendigo. My family has lived in Iowa since July of 2017, and we live in a small neighborhood with a minimum of 25 houses, and it is surrounded by a forest. I've seen many horror movies, and most of the movies are usually in a forest, so my paranoia was already alarmed. A year into living in Iowa, our dog was getting really old, so we got another dog so our old dog has a friend. We name our new dog Tucker, and he is a very energetic dog with everyone and everything. Our old dog died a couple of months later, and Tucker was the only interactive pet we have. A couple of years later, my mom and dad got divorced and she moved on to a guy that lives a couple of miles from our house. My mom and dad settled on a schedule on what day they can spend the day with us, while the other goes somewhere else for a couple of days. For context, my mom's side is native. I forgot what tribe we are, and we do believe in the lore of skinwalkers and wendigos. On one of my mom's days, she drives up this road where it's surrounded by a bunch of trees and a couple of houses and 2 farms. There is a hill on this road that she has to drive up, and as my mom drove up the hill, she saw something in a field near the neighborhood. What she saw was tall, gray-skinned, had deer hooves as feet, and it was walking into the woods. My mom was confused, and when she reached a stop sign, she looked back in her mirror and nothing. Now my mom was scared because she remembered all the stories of the Wendigo and drove off to our house. When she told me this, I was already scared because of the stories I've heard on YouTube. As she told the story, I remembered the skinwalker, mostly all the stories of the encounters I found on YouTube. After this, I was extremely cautious when I was outside on my bike rides. Without thinking, I rode my bike near the hill where my mom saw the possible Wendigo. I brought my camera to take pictures of the landscape because it was nice out, but my paranoia was going off when I was near the field, and I always trust my paranoia. As I rode off, I felt like I was being watched when I rode past the field. A couple of days later, it was night time, and my dog had to go outside to go to the bathroom. I put my dog on a leash that is connected to the porch and let Tucker out. I turned on a light that was outside so I could see what Tucker was doing, but I was cooking food in the kitchen for me, so I had to focus on that. When my food was finished, I heard my dog start barking at something, so I walked towards the door so I could see what he was doing. Tucker is barking at something in the dark. I opened the door and told Tucker to stop barking and get inside, because his business was done, and his barking could wake up the neighbors. After telling him to get inside, he kept barking at something in the darkness. My paranoia kicked in and I shouted out for him to get inside, but he kept barking. I started to get scared and I finally looked into the darkness to see nothing but eyes shining from the porch light. As I saw those eyes, an instinct kicked in to pull on the leash and scream out, "Get inside." Finally, Tucker responds by reacting to the pull of the leash and running towards the door, and I slammed the door as soon as Tucker ran inside. I shut the porch light off and took the leash off his collar, locked every single door and window in the house, and covered every window and anything that you can look through. After Tucker was off the leash, he ran downstairs into our basement, so I grabbed my food and went downstairs to keep an eye on my dog. It's been 2 months since then, and my routine when it got dark was what I did when I saw those eyes outside. Like close the blinds, lock the doors, and turn off the lights from outside. Now when I'm outside, I need a group of people or a weapon on me. Third story. The Hills Have Eyes. Story from Lovelock, Nevada. For context, I'm an 18-year-old male from Nevada, and I was 17 when this happened. 2 of my friends and I, we will call them Star 16 female and Adriana 17 female, one day had a great idea to drive the 45-minute drive to go explore the Lovelock Cave. It's about mid-August, and it's about 6 in the afternoon. When we came up with this idea, I was driving a '69 F100 at the time, and it had its issues. The starter was going out, my spark plugs were almost dead, and my timing was off. Given that it was pretty hard to start even when the engine was warm, let alone cold. Anyways, we decided to go to Lovelock. As we get to the base of the mountain, I crawl up the hill in the truck, as far as I could because I'm the most athletic, lazy person to exist and don't want to walk as much as possible. I get the truck up almost to the entrance to the cave and park it. By this time, the sun is setting and it's starting to get dark and cloudy. We get out of the truck and walk to the entrance of the cave. As we get to the entrance of the cave, we hear strange knocking coming from inside. We all just shake it off and keep going. We walk into the cave and start looking around for the supposed giant bones that were there when the cave was discovered. We keep going deeper and deeper into the cave and come across the mining platform. It's a platform made out of wood planks that was put there a long while ago. We then start hearing the knocking coming from closer to the entrance of the cave. We all look at each other in disbelief, and goosebumps start to rise to the top of my skin. By now, Star and Adriana are looking at me to see what my facial expression is giving about the sound. The knocking starts to turn into very quiet moan-like sounds. The girls run over behind me as we tried to exit the cave. As we're trying to leave the cave, the moaning sounds get louder. We can't seem to see where the noises are coming from, even though my big flashlight is lighting up the entire cave entrance. We slowly creep to the entrance of the cave, and I shine my light around. I didn't see anything until I shine the light at my truck. I then see something so tall and deer-like standing on its hind legs. Its antlers are huge, almost that of a moose. I don't think the girls see it at this point in time, so I shine my light away as quick as possible. I tell them to get down on their stomachs and crawl. We crawl away from the truck and stop. We then hear heavy footsteps coming towards us. I then yell at them to get up and start running. Follow my light, I yell as I start to get up and run. We all run up and down the mountain, trying to lose whatever this is. We somehow make it back to my truck and get in and lock the doors. I fumble with the keys to try to get them in the ignition, but I can't seem to get it correct. After about 20 seconds of fumbling with my keys to get into the ignition, I finally get it. I turn the key, and the truck doesn't do anything. I know what I have to do, but that means I have to get out of the truck and tap the starter with the metal rod I have sitting beside me in my seat. I roll my window down slightly and shine my light to see if I can see the thing that we saw. I didn't see it, so I deemed it safe to go out of the truck and tap the starter. I very silently opened my heavy metal door and stepped out of the truck and walked to the other side. I get down onto the dirt on the backside of the front passenger tire and push my metal rod between the frame and the fender wall. I then tap the starter a couple times and start to stand up. The girls start banging on the window, yelling and crying, pointing behind me. I don't even look behind me before I start running to the other side of the truck to get back in. I hear the thing behind me breathing heavy and staring me down. I hear it start to run very, very quickly as I'm approaching the other side of the truck. I open my door, jump in, and slam it closed. I lock the door as quickly as possible before the thing is banging up against the side of my door. It seems to have shifted figures, and it now looks like a decomposing human body. I turn the keys in the ignition, and the truck barely turns over. I let off the ignition and turn the key again. The truck struggles as it comes to life with a roaring sputter of the engine. I turn my headlights on and try to back out of the spot it's in. The thing is still banging on my door as I start to move. I put the pedal to the floor, and the thing then acts as if a deer in the headlights as my lights hit it. It freezes and looks at us with ferocious eyes. Scared, we all scream like little girls as I'm backing down the hill, and it starts to chase. I get down the hill to a point where I can turn around and pull off a movie scene. J-turn flawlessly. I throw it in first and gun it with the thing still giving chase. I reach the top of my RPMs and sling it in second gear, burning out on the dirt, causing a huge dust cloud. The truck roars down the dirt road as we're all on the verge of tears. We get away from the dirt and onto the asphalt as the thing is now losing us. I keep the throttle, pin the floor, and escape. Whatever that was. We get back home, and we all do research to figure out what we just saw. Now, I'm not going to say it on this platform in fear that saying its name will cause it to show up again. Needless to say, we will never be going back to those caves, especially in the dark. Fourth story. Shadows of the Northern Woods. In the deep darkness of an isolated corner of northern Wisconsin, a man found himself unable to fall asleep. Tossing and turning, his mind plagued by restlessness, he decided to embark on a midnight stroll to clear his thoughts. Little did he know that this innocent venture would lead him down a treacherous path. As he stepped into the backwoods, an eerie silence hung heavy in the air. The chilling wind whispered through the towering trees, its haunting melody sending shivers down his spine. In the distance, the full moon cast an ethereal glow, illuminating only fragments of the path, leaving much of it consumed by an impenetrable darkness. Suddenly, a haunting sound pierced the stillness, a baby's cry, carried by the wind. Fear coursed through the man's veins as he recalled the tales of the Wendigo, a malevolent creature rumored to haunt these woods. He knew better than to approach such ominous cries, but an overwhelming curiosity gripped him, urging him towards the source. With hesitant steps, he ventured further into the woods, his heart pounding in his chest. The trees seemed to close in around him, whispering secrets that he couldn't comprehend. Each step grew heavier, as if the very ground beneath him resisted his advance. And there it was, a fleeting glimpse of something unearthly emerging from the depths of darkness. A figure, contorted and macabre, concealed within the shroud of shadows. Time seemed to stand still as terror gripped the man's very core, his mind grappling to comprehend the unimaginable horror that loomed in front of him. And in that petrifying moment, unable to contain his dread any longer, a blood-curdling scream erupted from his trembling lips, shattering the silence of the night. H. Fifth story. Not alone while hunting. It got silent, completely, utterly silent. I knew something was wrong, and so did Mira. We don't talk about it often, but this experience is something that will stay with us for the rest of our lives, and not by choice either. It was late summer, not too hot, not too cold. Perfect for a 2-day hunting/hiking trek. Until we saw it. At first, we couldn't actually see it, just noises and feelings. We were setting up our tent and getting ready to check out for the night. As Mira and I were finally drifting off to sleep, we heard a loud snap and our heads shot up like a deer's. We heard footsteps crunching against the dry forest floor, seeming to get closer and farther as if someone or something was pacing outside of our tent. This went on for hours until the sun started to ascend from the horizon. Mira and I stayed up the entire time, not making a sound in fear whatever was outside the tent would hear us. After taking a few-hour nap due to our restless night, we decided to set up our tree stand and try to bring home dinner. We set up the stand and were sitting in it for an hour or so and already shot a few squirrels, so we decided it was time to go when the forest had seemed to become clear of wildlife. But that's when Mira spotted a massive 9-point buck in the distance. However, when we hear a blood-curdling shriek, we know that whatever is over there is not a deer. It didn't seem to notice we were in the stand, though. It unnaturally sauntered over to where we were, dragging a skinned, eviscerated deer between its sharp claws, now walking on 2 legs. Now that we looked at it, it kind of looked human. But something was terribly wrong. It seemed to be using the deer hide as a disguise. We think this because the thing was wearing the deer's skull on its head, and its fur was patchy and seemed to be falling off. Other campers were driving past, screeching their tires for some reason. This alerted the creature, causing it to run away with one last shrill. We were lucky enough to not be alone. But if you ever consider going into the woods alone, do not, and I mean, do not do it. Sixth story. My encounter with a Wendigo. I'm a mortar infantryman for the Army. We're trained to deal with deadly situations and be prepared to fight to the death if needed. My experience happened approximately 4 years ago, but he hasn't left me alone since then. One day during January that year, my parents had me walk the family dog and my dog, so I decided to bring them to the golf course that was shut down for the season. Now across the golf course, there's a small forest area that I usually walk them in because it's the closest I get to forests since I live in the city. Now I live about 20 minutes from Minneapolis in Minnesota. It's very industrialized here, and it's one place you wouldn't expect to run into something like this. Back to the story, I went in through the opening and went down the trail. That place always felt like it was really off for some reason. I don't know, call it a sense that something is wrong with that place, and the fact that there's no sound in the woods. I ignored it and went on with their walk, and suddenly I felt like I was being watched. I couldn't tell anything with all the snow on the trees, and the fact that there's no snow that fell from them either. So like a dumbass, I ignored it and went on. I went out the other side of the forest and headed up a hill that leads to a road that leads to the end of the golf course. I felt the feeling of being watched again and turned around on instinct and saw it. It was pale white figure standing in the tree. I'm a person who always believed in the supernatural and enjoyed studying it, and I knew what that thing was. It was a Wendigo, and I knew I needed to get out of there. For those who don't know, a Wendigo is a mythical creature that is believed in Native American folklore. It's believed that it's a carnivorous monster that never stops eating. Back to the story, I ran as fast as I could with the dogs across the street, and it started to chase me. I almost got hit by an oncoming van, and it stopped and looked at what I was running from, and immediately got back in his van and drove off faster than he did before. While he was distracted, I ran as fast as I could, and like a dumbass, I ran back to my home. Once I got home, I acted as natural as I could and went to my room and tried my best to calm down. By dinner, I had calmed down and ate dinner. Once it came to going to bed, it's when it started to get creepy. To explain the layout of where I am in the house, my room is right below the roof and has another small roof that is above the front porch, which is right outside my window. Back to the story, I shut my blinds and got ready for bed, but then I heard footsteps on my roof, followed by a small thump right outside my window. I saw the silhouette of it. That fucker was hunched over looking in my window as if he could see me. I was terrified by this and couldn't sleep at all. I couldn't even breathe. It stood there for what felt like eternity, which was only about 2 hours. After that time had passed, he gave up after letting out a scream. It was like a mix of the alien scream and a cat getting skinned alive, or the scream from a Wendigo from the video game Until Dawn. My parents wondered what was going on, and I made up some bullshit excuse. They believed me and headed back to bed. There was no need to get them into this, and it's not like they'll believe me anyway. My dumb ass didn't take a picture or video. That wasn't the end of it. This happened every day of every week for about 2 months, then turned to every other day to every week to every month. Nowadays I don't see it much, but I see him every now and then. I still go to that area even to this day, and even found a skinwalker there, but that's a story for another day. If you ever run into a Wendigo, run. Run as fast as you can, as far away as you can. I don't care if you have to run to a new city. Fuck, I don't care if you have to leave the state. Just run so far away that you lose that fucker. Or the same events that happened to me may happen to you. If you have any information about how to kill this fucker, leave it in the comments. I've already tried holy water, and it didn't work. Put that shit all over the roof outside my window, and the fucker was standing on it like it was nothing. Be careful. Sometimes while searching for monsters, they'll end up finding you. Seventh story. The forest where the deer cry blood. I had been a hunter for most of my life leading up to this incident. The smell of the warm air and the beauty of nature always had me at ease. I never felt scared alone at night because I have seen everything there is to be scared of. I have seen bears the size of a small car and animals so vicious they would kill anything that moved. The one thing I was never scared of was deer. I had heard the tales of the skinwalker, the Wendigo, and pretty much anything in between. My uncle was an expert in tracking and hunting. We always went on trips together and would always come back with a fresh kill. He had something about him. It was a rule. I remember it so vividly because it was weird. He never wanted to go hunting in winter. I never asked why. I don't know, but something about it always had me on edge. One day it was winter, and I was about to go deer hunting when my uncle stopped at my front door. When he came in, he saw my packed supplies and my rifle and knew I was about to go hunting. He immediately burst into a wrath of anger as he dragged me to a wall and got into my face. "What the fuck do you think you're doing?" His spit went all over my face as he looked crazy. He looked primal, as if he was fearful of something that he did not want to share. It's the same face you would expect a child to make if they were dumped in the middle of nowhere. The same face of fear you see in people who have PTSD. I calmly brushed him off and got to the door saying I was going hunting. I was not about to fight with my uncle and ruin this trip, as I hadn't gone hunting for close to a month. When you hunt, you get adjusted to it, and when you go on breaks, you actually miss it. As I got into my truck, my uncle peered at me out the window. He was there to take care of my house, but before I reversed, he left with the door open. My uncle is prone to outbursts. As I should mention, he's only ever done it a few times, and it's always in a situation where the reaction suits it. Not this one, however. What was so bad about hunting in the winter? The spot I had planned was an isolated one. It was a very heavily forested area which I had not been to before. I obviously had mapped the area out and brought essential survival tools in case the worst came. But I never thought I would have to use it after all those years out in the forest. When I arrived, the crisp, cold air immediately saturated me in discomfort. I quickly got another layer of clothes on before I started to walk to where I would set up camp for the night. The clearing I had chosen was a pretty tight one. There was a big tree in the center that stood tall above the rest. It was called the Forest Star, which suited it. Around the clearing, the forest was extremely dense. Almost no sun shone through the top. There was a small hunting tower north of the entrance of the clearing, so it was a direct walk from camp. As I walked ahead, I noticed something. There were small droplets of blood littering the ground. My first thought was that it must have been an injured animal or something like that, but the droplets were small and almost even. I shook the thought out of my head and made it to my setup, and I started to pin my tent. When I was done, I checked my watch. It was around 5:30 p.m. I had around 2 hours for hunting before it was pitch black, and so I made it to the tower. When I undid my rifle from its case, I heard scampering. Shaking it off, I took position and waited. As I stood there, time almost slowed down. I was in a precise focus and was ready for anything. I wasn't ready for what I saw. Out came 2 small bucks that seemed injured. There were small droplets of blood coming from their eyes. As I focused, and I saw that it wasn't dried blood. It was fresh, and it was oozing from their eyes. I was shocked. I had never seen anything like it. Multiple scenarios ran through my head. I was thinking, had a hunter shot both of them in the eyes and managed to not kill them? But each scenario seemed more unlikely than the last. I took aim at the closest one and shot it. It stood there for a second, just not moving. Then they trotted off as if nothing had happened. Blood was running from the wound, so I had obviously hit it, but it didn't seem scared nor fazed. I decided that was enough and sort of jogged to my site. I was freaked out and decided that I'd cook dinner and go to bed early. When I scampered around my pack, I pulled out a tin of beans. I grabbed a pot and started a fire and began cooking them. As I cracked open a beer, the familiar sound of a branch snapping sounded off next to me. I thought it was probably just a small deer, and I brushed it off as I sat and relaxed. I was thinking about the deer, and I started to chalk it up to the fact I must not have hit deep and the deer were shocked. When I finished eating, I went to bed. I was shivering in the night cold, and I could feel my body shaking uncontrollably. As I dozed off after a brutal 2 hours of cold, I heard another snap. This time, however, it was a lot louder, like a bear. I immediately grabbed my rifle and went out of my tent. My fire burned low, and in the distance, I saw 2 red lights. I walked towards it when my mind started to race. Something felt wrong. As I closed the distance, my gut was literally twisted. My mind was anxious, and I felt like I was about to break down. Then I realized what was wrong. Those weren't lights. They were 2 big, beady, solid red eyes. There were no pupils. They were just orbs hovering. When I realized, I stood frozen. I thought it was a big cat, but what emerged was so much worse. Its fur was black, darker than the night around us. Its antlers grew twisted and uneven. But the worst part? It was crying blood. Deep red droplets were pelting down its unnatural eyes. I couldn't make a sound. I was frozen in fear. Then it started to make sounds, the sounds of a baby crying. It was horrible. The sounds of unnatural wails filled the cold air, making it worse. My body felt crumpled, and so I finally broke out into a sprint. When I looked back, it stood there. It wasn't even breathing. But the sounds of that baby crying weren't fading. It was like a speaker was attached to my ear. When I made it back to camp, I rushed to pack my stuff. In a hurry, I ran, leaving the tent behind, and I rushed to my truck. As I fumbled with the keys, I saw that something was walking slowly towards me. That's when the whispering started. Terrible, faint voices echoed throughout the forest as my mind started to close. I felt my cerebral melting as anything I tried to do would not happen. It was like sleep paralysis. As I stood there, I found the strength to finally open the door and get in my car. I slammed the door shut, and that thing was right at the window. I started to sob as I jammed the keys in the ignition. My mind felt fried as I swerved out of there. I didn't care if I hit anything. I just wanted to be away from that thing. Before I could properly back out, it stood up on its legs, and it repeated a voice I recognized. You do not escape thee. The forests are mine. It was my grandpa's voice. He died when I was 6, and I never knew any of the details. The thing then made a howl, a terrible shrieking howl that hurt my entire body. As it did so, I heard scampering as more of those things came out. They had blood running from their eyes as well. The baby cries started again, and that's when I finally drove out of that fucking place. When I raced home, I immediately barged into the door. My shoulder ached, but I didn't care. I shoved my door and locked it and ran into my kitchen. That's when I saw my uncle sitting at the table enjoying a small glass of scotch. So, you saw what I did, didn't you, Anthony? I couldn't form words. I was so shocked. My uncle came up to me and said, "What you saw out there is my rule I abide by. There are things in those forests in winter that are so horrible even the most seasoned can't handle it. I saw it when I was a boy, and since then I don't hunt during winter." I finally mustered a sentence. Was it? He took a small sip before sitting me down. You saw something called Urbarak. It is an ancient being that dwells in the forests during these winters. Hunters who see it usually never are the same again, but some never come home. I was lucky. My uncle sort of sniffled as he told me about his encounter with Urbarak. When I was 23, my father and I went out into the woods on a very cold winter to hunt. Our family was struggling, so we didn't have much food. When we were hunting, my father called out to me, but before I could even get to him, I heard him yell out before he fell silent. I never saw him again, but what stood there was worse than the loss of my own. A deer with red eyes, black fur, and twisted antlers stood there. Blood was running from its eyes. Then it started to cry like a baby. My uncle broke down and had to take a second before continuing. I comforted him as I was teary-eyed. It ran after me, Anthony, on two legs. It was like a human, and I rushed to get away from it. I managed to get myself. He rolled up his sleeve to reveal a terrible red scar that ran across the entire underside of his arm. It was trying to feast on me. It knew I feared it. But eventually I managed to lose it. He finally finished his scotch before continuing. I was stuck in those forests for 3 days fighting to survive. I heard its cries and whispers all around as I tried to make it out. I finally arrived at a road and was taken in by the police. No trace was found of my father except for one thing. They found blood at the scene and tested it. It was my father's. What was strange about it? It was mixed with his tears. My uncle finally stood up. Fear it, for it knows who you are. Those were his last words. He left my house, and the police found him wrapped up in a noose 2 days later. It broke me. My hunting buddy and best friend was gone. There was one detail about his suicide that was never resolved. He had droplets of blood coming from his eyes. The coroner's inspection said it was an aneurysm, but I'm not so sure that is the truth. I am 50 now, and I haven't been hunting in 2 decades. I can't even go into the forests anymore. I'm thinking about going back and seeing what Urbarak is. Maybe I can kill him. Beware Urbarak, for he lurks in the cold. 8th story. Camping. Be woke to the smell of blood. It was so thick, she could taste the iron on her tongue. She pushed her way out of her lavender sleeping bag, glancing around with half-lidded eyes. Nothing seemed to explain where the smell. Wait. There, on the other side of the tent, where her fiancé had once been sleeping soundly beside her, a shredded hole. Tentatively, Bee crawled towards the strips of tent blowing softly with the snowy wind. Moving closer, the tangy yet undeniable smell of blood grew stronger. It was still too dark to see very clearly, and she still couldn't shake all of the effects of the celebratory alcohol they had drank the evening before. She patted the edges of the tent until she found the small but bright LED lantern. Turning on the light blinded her for just a moment. She blinked and blinked again. It had to be the alcohol. She was still drunk and hallucinating. Had to be. Otherwise, that was an arm laying just outside the shredded tent side, newly minted engagement ring on the left hand. Otherwise, that was in fact a pool of crimson blood and pulp beyond that. Otherwise, that was her fiancé's head laying in the snow, his face the picture of absolute terror. Her mind stopped. She stopped. No, no, no. She couldn't scream, couldn't breathe. She felt cold, and it wasn't from the snow lightly coating her hand. Crunch, crunch, crack. Slowly, so very slowly, Bee lifted the light higher and out into the gloom. There, hunched over, a gargantuan creature of the purest white fur ate. Crack, snap, crunch. Finally finding her voice, Bee gasped in horror. The creature paused and swiveled its grotesque head towards her. Hollow, obsidian eyes raked over her as blood dripped from its gaping maw in long tendrils over the snow-white fur. Foot-long, curved antlers protruded from its massive head. The creature stood and was easily 7 feet tall with hands the size of her head. The most horrifying part was that it was smiling at her. No, not smiled, grinned. It grinned like it knew a secret that she didn't. Then she saw what the creature had been eating moments before. What was left of a torso and one leg dropped and splattered against the snow with a wet plop. Her scream pierced the night air, just as chilling as the snow-covered landscape around them. This was supposed to be a beautiful memory for them. Him, on one knee in the glittering ring. It was all perfect. Now it was a perfectly horrifying experience. She scrambled back, her nails ripped at the tent below. The creature stalked forward, a predator at ease. She clawed around the tent, searching for anything she could use. It was all hopeless, she knew, but her instincts wouldn't let her go down without a fight. Pain as she had never known before shot up her leg, searing and all-consuming. Looking back, the creature had speared one claw into her right calf, pinning her to the ground. The creature's face, a nightmare's worst creation, grinned at her from the shredded hole. Its teeth, ivory and deadly. Then it began dragging her backwards, towards its bloody, gaping mouth. Days later, missing posters went up and sobbing pleas from family and friends were all that remained of the happy couple. Ninth story. The wind in the wood. He inhaled deep through his nose, taking in the scent of Indian Toby blossoms. He felt a sense of calm wash over him. It had been years since his schedule afforded him the opportunity to hunt spring gobbler. His son wanted to hunt from another blind this morning. Though he was somewhat taken aback, he understood. His son was becoming a man. He smiled proudly at the thought of his son's strength and independence. His daydream was shattered by a rustling in foliage some 25 yards ahead of him. He sat quietly, in perfect stillness as he saw the antlers. Unusual for this time of year, he thought to himself. His eyes widened as the animal came into view. He closed his eyes hard, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. His sense of smell was assaulted by the odor of rotting flesh. He shivered at the sight of it. Not quite man, nor animal. A mismatch of features, antlers protruding from its head, standing on thin legs of skin and bone. He inhaled sharply, choking on his spit. He tried desperately to stifle his cough. Its vision flicked directly to his gaze. The beast emitted a shrill tone. It spread its arms wide as it dashed toward his blind. He scampered out, running for his life. Every few yards he ran, it was there, just in front of him. He turned and ran in a different direction, each time the same result. He composed himself and leveled his shotgun at it, screaming, "Get the fuck out of here!" A sinister grin widened on its face as it whispered, "Bold of the interloper to make demands of me." In that instant it disappeared. His hands went numb, his knees weak. He collapsed onto the forest floor. His vision blurred as he felt an unsettling sleep fall over him. He struggled against it as he heard a soft, but sinister voice. "It is I, who demand of the interloper." The boy heard his father's voice calling out in the distance, a plea for help. He ran as fast as he could. His father had never once asked for his help. He found his father knelt down, sobbing and muttering. He grabbed his father's shoulder. "What's wrong, Dad?" His father's voice was weak. "I'm so hungry." The son asked in a panic, "Is it your blood sugar?" His father grabbed his wrist hard, squeezing. His father repeated, "I'm so hungry." His grip tightened, harder and harder. The son shrieked as the bones in his wrist shattered. A shot and terrified screams made the conservation officer grimace. He shook his head as he started to approach the screams. An eerie silence made him take pause. The hair on his neck stood on end. He crept forward and found the source of the now silent screams. A man eating the entrails of a young boy. The officer slowly drew his pistol, and the man gazed at him longingly. "I'm so hungry." 10th story. Georgia Wendigo encounter. Growing up in the mountains of North Georgia, camping and hiking were things me and my brother did so often it was second nature. So anytime Ryan and I had a break from school, we would head straight for the woods. We packed our gear, let our parents know where we were going, and that was that. No questions asked. We decided to camp about midways through Jack's River Trail in the Cohutta Wilderness, and it's a trail we knew fairly well as we had used to a few times before to practice long hikes. We arrived at the trailhead around lunchtime, parked the car, got our gear out, and headed into the woods. We passed a few hikers as moved along and asked them how the trail looked, and the answer was always the same: wet. Jack's River Trail probably crossed the river 50 times as it went along its 17-mile-plus journey, and with the colder temperatures of late fall settling in, it was harder for the trail to stay dry. We moved deeper into the trail and started to look for a place to make camp. This is where Ryan and I made our first mistake. You see, Ryan and I have this rule: we don't camp near people if at all possible. Call us paranoid, but the last thing we want is for someone to drag us out of our tents and into the woods, never to be seen again. So we always camped a pretty decent ways off of the trail and in the area that wasn't popular with overnight camping. Roughly 2.5 hours or so, we found what we thought was the perfect place to set up for the 2 nights that we would be out. We came up to Horseshoe Bend and ventured about half a mile off the trail into a clearing and set up. We built a teepee fire lay for that night and pitched our tents on either side. After setting up and unloading, we decided to walk back to the trail and go exploring around some of many swimming holes Jack's River had to offer. This was during Thanksgiving break, and I remember being surprised at how few people were on the trail. Maybe it was the weather or the fact that this was early in the week, but there didn't seem to be anyone hiking, much less staying the night. Around 5 o'clock, Ryan and I headed back to camp to start our fire, make dinner, and settle in for the night. As soon as the sun began to set, the cold rushed in. We added more wood to the fire, sat close, and just enjoyed conversation. Ryan was 2 years behind me in school. I was a senior, and he was a sophomore, but growing up we had always been close. We always hung out in the same groups, played the same sports, had the same hobbies, etc. Around 9, we were settled comfortably around the fire. I had just texted our mom to let her know we were safe and getting ready for bed, and I remember we were talking about dreading going to our grandparents' house for Thanksgiving and having the same awkward conversations we had each year with family we only saw on holidays when things started to get strange. We were no stranger to sounds in the woods, and these woods were full of animals, from deer to black bears, and even the random wild boar. If you are in the woods enough, you learn to distinguish certain sounds, and what we were hearing I can only chalk up to as odd. What Ryan and I heard was what sounded like someone sneaking around slowly just out of eyesight. With an animal walking on 4 legs, you hear a tighter group of steps, but what we were hearing sound very distinct to what a human sounds like when walking slowly or trying to move without making much sound. I remember we both pulled out our flashlights and shone it in the direction we felt the sounds were coming from, but that is what was so weird. Whenever we would fix our lights on a spot, we thought the sound were coming from the location of the sound would suddenly change. It was as if there were multiple people walking around us. That's when the whistling started. At first I thought it was the wind, and I remember thinking maybe the wind is just throwing leaves around, and what we are hearing is nothing but the wilderness around us. Ryan looked at me and asked if I was hearing that. I didn't answer and was trying to focus hard on each individual sound. 2 consecutive notes with roughly a 3 to 4 second gap, and then 2 more consecutive notes. Over and over again. Ryan kept asking if I heard that, and I put my finger to my lips, trying to keep him from talking. The fear I felt was incredible. My jaw was tight, my fist clenched, knowing I wasn't ready for whatever was out there, if it was anything at all. The whistling continued for what felt like forever, but thinking it through was maybe 5 minutes when Ryan finally yelled out into the darkness, "Hey, quiet." The whistling stopped. The crunching of the wood stopped. Nothing. I was pissed. I looked at Ryan with a, "What the hell?" look, and he shrugged his shoulders. "I had to do something," he said. I just shook my head. We sat there in silence for a few minutes when the woods erupted with noise. Something or someone was running in a circle around our campsite. The whistling came back. 2 consecutive notes with the same 3 to 4 second gap, and then 2 more consecutive notes. How could someone whistle this loudly without cracking while also running? I was done. I stood up, shining my flashlight in all directions, trying to catch a glimpse of whatever was screwing with us. Nothing. It felt close enough to touch, but we never saw a thing. That's when the movement stopped, but the whistling was still constant. It was so loud. Inhumanly loud. I looked at Ryan and told him to call the police. Now this is the part one will never forget. The part one never liked to talk about. While Ryan was on the phone with the dispatcher and telling them our location and what was going on, I stepped around the fire towards my tent. Inside my bag, I had a 6-inch fixed blade that I always carried and thought I would feel a bit more comfortable with it in my hand more than just my flashlight. Yes, I went to unzip my tent. Trying to keep my eyes toward the woods, I heard some movement directly in front of me. I swept my light up in front of me, and for maybe 2 seconds I saw it. Whatever this person or thing was, it was about 5 feet up in a tree. Everything about it was long. Its arms, legs, neck, fingers, everything. And it was fast. As soon as the light hit it, launched backwards off of the tree. I heard it land, but it either jumped an impossible distance or landed in a thicket, because I heard it but never saw. I don't think I have ever yelled so loud. I ran back to where Ryan was and sat down. He kept asking me what I saw, but I couldn't answer. I just kept thinking about what I saw. Maybe 10 minutes later, we saw a couple of flashlight beams coming through the woods, and about 3 guys came into view, asking if everything was okay. I settled a bit and started asking them if they had seen or heard anything. All they said was they heard a lot of movement and then heard my scream, and that's when they headed in our direction. I tried to explain what had happened without sounding crazy, but it didn't seem to work. One of the guys walked around a bit and came back and said he didn't see anything. Ryan told them that we called the police, and roughly 30 minutes later, a park ranger showed up. Ryan and I tried explaining everything to him, but he just chalked it up to either a curious animal or some campers trying to mess with us. Either way, Ryan and I decided we weren't staying the night. We packed our stuff up and walked out of the woods with the ranger. He took our statement and we got in our car and drove home. Ryan and I don't talk about what happened that night, but neither of us have been back to Jack's River Trail and will probably never go back.